Can Starfield even be fixed at this point? Let's find out.
My corporate overlords are telling me that I have to extend the runtime of this video a little bit longer, so that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what they said, how this little survey worked, and give you the deets. It's actually quite simple. I reached out to a bunch of game developers that I know of and that I've spoken to in years past. I also sent the survey to some modders that I know, and I also opened this survey publicly to anybody who wanted to fill it out. However, I did request for verifying information so I could make sure that they actually were who they said they were. Of course, all of this—
Verifying information on the internet? I'm Barack Obama. And if you don't agree with that, you're racist.
This is being kept confidential. I'm not going to like reveal names or jobs or anything like that of anybody who participated in the survey, since anonymity was kind of like the thing with this. But I can confirm that when all was said and done, I had 90 people that I was able to confirm actually were who they said they were, worked in the gaming industry or as software engineers outside of the gaming industry, or were verified modders. And those people make up all of the responses that we're going to talk about today. 90 people isn't a ton, but this is 90 people.
I think that's a lot.
People who know their stuff who are talking about this, which is 90 times more credibility than I have when discussing issues of software engineering. So I am still gonna take it. One of the first questions I asked everybody was how they would rate Bethesda Game Studios as a developer in 2024, and the responses were,
who the fuck gave it a 10?
a little less amazing than I was expecting. I mean, everything averaged out to about a 5 out of 10, floating between 4s and 6s.
That is still, dude, let's be honest, Bethesda is a solid 3 at this point. What are their last games? Redfall, 76, the 57 trillion 3D release of Skyrim, and, well, Starfield. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And all of this is garbage.
Mostly. I think that represents the general feeling a lot.
Redfall wasn't made by Bethesda. What are you talking about, idiot? Read a book. Bethesda had complete 100% oversight, and they put their seal of approval on everything that was done in Redfall. It is literally Bethesda's game, 100%.
People have. I think if you were to ask this question 5 years ago or 10 years ago, the answers would have been much, much different. But because you're asking in the context of 2024, after Starfield, there's a lot of disappointment and frustration in the broader gaming community right now, and even among people that work in this industry, they're not that impressed. I also asked them what they thought of Starfield on a technical level, and this also was not that forgiving.
Who the hell is putting in force? They must be trolling.
Everybody landed at about a 4 or a 5 on average. And it's pretty clear that software engineers and people that work in game development in general, at least the ones that responded to this survey, are not very impressed with Starfield. What?
Yeah, no shit. It's a, what, 20-year-old engine at this point? Yeah, no one's gonna be impressed with that. Dude, I'm not an engineer. I'm not impressed with a 20-year-old engine that has been a little bit spruced up, and now there's physics in it. There's physics in it. Look at that domino effect. You can drop a sandwich. Yeah, if that impresses you, I'm sorry to say this, but you should probably go get checked by the government and get free money from them for the rest of your life, because God knows you're not doing anything else.
So ever, even though it was trying to do something really different, really novel in terms of simulations and in terms of broad scope, 1,000 planets and all of this procedural stuff, it just was not that impressive to people that actually work in this industry, which again, I thought was interesting. This was also...
Why is it, by the way, why would that be interesting? Generating one random location on a planet is the same as generating 4 random locations on a planet, which is the equivalent of generating 1,000 different planets each with 4 locations on it. If you can generate one location, you can generate the rest.
So interesting, overwhelmingly people consider the creation engine to be significantly inferior to other engines that they were familiar with, and individual responses we'll get into in a little bit.
Dude, who the hell is... Dude, the people who made pressed 10 are clearly trolling.
Were quite damning, especially among people who used to work with the creation engine a lot, either because they used to work at Bethesda Game Studios or an adjacent company, or because they were modders who then went on to work with other engines elsewhere. Overwhelmingly, people do not have a lot of good things to
Okay, I hope he has a survey part where it asks your hair color.
say about it after they've tried.
Because that is very, very necessary to figure out the error ratio of the survey.
Something else. Once they've tasted the forbidden fruit, they find it extremely...
And pronoun identification. Again, we're talking about ex-developers, and a lot of developers are corrupt pieces of garbage.
wanting. Now, when I asked everybody whether they thought that Starfield's problems could be patched or solved through updates, just under 68% of respondents straight up said no. 15.6 said that yes, they think that these problems could be solved, and all of these other
why do you need to be a developer to actually answer this question? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Because the answer is obviously no. You cannot patch out the horrible dialogue. You cannot patch out the abysmally poor game mechanics. Well, technically you can actually patch out the talent points, the ship combat, a lot of things. But there are a couple of core things that cannot be patched out. And I really doubt that they will ever patch out, for example, talent points.
Responses are individual counters that have answers that are a little bit more elaborate, but most of them still fall into the no category. Could, but won't, stuff like that. But this brings us to the crux of the question, which is whether or not the problems we're discussing can actually be fixed. What are the problems, though? Well, I did ask them that, and this was sort of all over the place. A lot of people agreed that issues such as constant load screens, performance, traversal, NPC AI, all of those things were issues within the game. But by my count, well over 95% of the responses and answers all tie back into technical restrictions that are imposed by the tool set that Bethesda's using, which is the creation engine, which we've been through a lot. Now, a lot of these responses were really interesting, and I had a lot of fun reading through all of these. And again, thank you to everybody who participated in this. And while some of them bring up really good points, such as the fact that it's not as simple as just pointing to one thing and saying, oh, it's because of the creation engine that Starfield has problems. It's not that simple. There's a lot more going on. But there are still core strengths and core weaknesses with the creation engine and the toolset Bethesda's using that are specifically weak.
We know that this argument is complete bunk. The creation engine is 100% not even remotely close to being responsible for Starfield being complete garbage. Because, if I'm not mistaken, now I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure Fallout 4 is made on the creation engine, Fallout 3 was made on the creation engine, hell, Oblivion and Morrowind were made on an earlier version of the creation engine, but those games, for some magical reason, aren't that bad. Yet Starfield is. So, it's not a fault of the engine. It is a fault of what you did in the game.
When it comes to a game like Starfield, which is why I think there's a real argument to be made.
Listen, if people can enjoy and like pixel games, then there's no reason you would ever fault the engine, for example, Starfield's engine, for failing the game. It just doesn't happen. If a pixel game can be enjoyed, then there's no reason that any game fails because of its engine.
That Starfield was held back by its design, not necessarily exclusively because of its tech. They kind of work hand in hand. It's almost like if you lived in a really hot climate, like say you're in Phoenix, Arizona or something in the summer, and you're like, okay,
that place that's melting into the ground? I don't know if that's true.
Okay, I'm gonna make a vacation destination. It's gonna be my big business idea. That's what I'm gonna do. It's gonna make so much money. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a ski slope.
Amazing.
Like, why did you choose to do that? Like, you have this beautiful like place. You're in a great spot. You have all these things you can do. You've got lots of opportunities, but that's probably the worst thing you could possibly do with what you've got in front of you, with your capabilities, with your location, with the tools that you have before you. You should instead do like a massive water park, or you should do like a crazy hiking trail, or like a sauna, or like some sort of crazy theme park or something like that. Why did you choose a ski slope in a desert? You know, you'd ask why you chose to make a poor decision that directly goes against everything that the context of the situation and your capabilities would allow you to do. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Starfield is. It is a game that's a cool idea at the outset, but with the creation engine specifically, it's probably the worst game they could have possibly tried to make. This respondent said load screens are unavoidable due to the mass amount of physics calculations and the way the engine will be handling them. The engine would require new tools or a revamp in order to cull physics entities in a way where they can be stored in the memory.
Isn't this, by the way, complete bunk? There are other engines that use loading screens, but after a while they figured out seamless loading screens.
Unfortunately, this would be even heavier.
Fallout 4 had seamless loading screens. And don't give me that shit that, oh, Fallout 4 had less physics. Are you kidding me? The outside world had way more physics than 20 planets in Starfield put together.
Heavier on the CPU and RAM hardware. Something like performance and optimization can always be improved, as they already have. The game can be better programmed to utilize all CPU cores for physics calculations, etc. It's very dependent on the type of issue that requires solving. And I think that this is a common thread in a lot of these responses. It seems like most of the problems with the load screens tie back into one of the core strengths in many ways of the creation engine, which is that every item in your inventory has a physical model, and you can place that item anywhere in the game and it will stay there. It will have realistic physics applied to it. It will drop on the ground, it'll fall off the table, whatever else, and it will stay where you put it, which is a really cool thing to have in your game, especially in something like Skyrim or even like a Fallout 4, where every piece of junk is going to stay there and realistically interact with the world. That's super, super cool. And not many other game engines have that or are even capable of doing that. But part of the reason why
that's a good moment.
Other engines aren't capable of that is because they don't really want to be capable of it. Because when you do that, there is so much data that has to be basically remembered by the computer or by the console at any given time that they have to load it in separately. And that's why each of these instances, when you load into a new building or you load into a new planet, fishbowl to explore, they each have to be kept independently, unloaded and loaded back in as you go. Because if they were doing a constant streaming thing where you go from this planet surface into space, into that planet surface, into space, into that planet surface, into a building, down into a cave, back out, it would just be too much for it to handle. And that's why in games like No Man's Sky, where you can do that stuff, you don't have the same level of physics simulations that you get in a game like Starfield. And this is where design comes back in.
Okay. I want you to answer me this though. Who gives a shit about the fucking physics simulation in Starfield, huh? Who actually cares? Who cares that you can stack a bunch of sandwiches and they fall on top of each other? Who cares? The answer is no one. No one gives a single shit about that. Because that's not what makes a game good. So, yeah, if Starfield not having loading screens would mean no sandwich physics, I would be completely fine with that. But why do I have a feeling that's not what actually is happening?
Into the equation, because it's really cool to, as they showed off in some of the early reveals of Starfield, it's cool to have hundreds of sandwiches in your spaceship that realistically fall and tumble down as you collect them. That was one of the big things they showed off, was one of their developers that would just keep all these sandwiches in the cargo hold of their spaceship. That's kind of cool, but why is that important in a space game? How does a space game about exploration and adventure benefit from having realistic sandwich simulation? I don't get it. Other people thought it was really cool and exciting. I don't know why that was so thrilling, because the cost of all of that physics simulation is that things have to be loaded in separately and in their own instances. And as this developer outlined, the only way to get rid of the constant load screens would be to have some way to
Now this is slightly better though.
pull physics entities just
God, I fucking love watermelon. Soon it's summer. I'm gonna eat so much watermelon.
like physical objects that are rendered in a given scene, but that would require such a massive undertaking to rewrite and recode how the game actually handles physical objects that it's probably not even possible in an update or any sort of iterative improvement that would be short of a full-on sequel. And there's other problems as well, such as the one I outlined in my last video, going over how modders are just abandoning Starfield because it's too much work, basically. And this is the problem with using floats and how they actually calculate physical presences and procedural generation within these worlds. Effectively, like, the further away you get from an origin point, the less accurate things become and the worse procedural generation tech becomes. It's an age-old problem. It affected like Minecraft a decade ago. It's something they were able to fix, but it's something so core to the creation engine and how they handle instances when you load in, because everything in the creation engine is about loading into a new instance, and if you were to undo that, it would just require rewriting pretty much everything. So
do that. Just do that. Bethesda, I don't care. Just do that. I don't care about your dumb engine. Just do that in that case.
it's just a huge problem that is really, really freaking difficult to solve and would be extremely expensive to solve. And it might not even be possible at the end of the day. I think this puts it well. The fundamental problem with Starfield is that the foundations are already set in obsolete tech and design decisions. As I mentioned in previous answers, modders can resolve a good swath of the game's issues, but the effort required to make a total overhaul of mods for Starfield might not be as justifiable as it was back then with Skyrim. And he goes on to describe all of the smaller issues that Starfield suffers from and wraps it up with,
That guy was a modder previously who answered that question. No developer would care about the opinion of a modder, I guess.
can fix 1,000 of those paper cut sized problems, but the amputated limb size problem they can only get a band-aid solution for. And that's the thing, like, they can fix broken quest lines, they can fix like frame rates that drop, they can fix even bigger cuts such as the lack of maps within cities and things like that. But the biggest problems with Starfield, such as the constantly repeated environments, encounters, the planets that lack any sort of interesting locations, the lack of...
Wait, that's not an engine problem. That's just a problem because Bethesda didn't create enough templates. The fact that you can enter 3 caves and the 3rd cave is going to be the same as the 1st cave is just a lack of randomization options, not an actual problem with the system. That's just the devs being lazy hacks.
free traversal from planet surface to other planets, and the mind-numbing grind of constant load screens. Those things can't be fixed because they are just simply so massive it would require...
Now, a lot of things can be fixed. I'm going to tell you a couple of secrets I found about Starfield. So, you see this grab jump shit? Well, let me tell you a secret about this. This is not a loading screen, okay? This is happening, and this is not a loading screen. The old loading screen only happens...
Those things can't be fixed because...
This is still not a loading
they
screen.
They are just simply so massive.
Bam! This is where the loading screen starts to happen, when the loading screen actually happens. So the animation before this is just an animation that is not even tied to the loading screen. Bethesda could have probably avoided half the loading screens in the game just by doing that. Actually, when you start the grab jump, it's a loading screen. It's loading the next part of the game. But that's not magically happening for some reason. They just chose to not do it.
It would require a total redesign. So all of this to say, it seems like the biggest issues, such as the constantly repeated environments and encounters, the procedural generation tech problems, the constant load screens, those biggest issues can't be fixed because it's just how the game works. It is...
Yeah, I don't believe that.
Starfield. There's no undoing it because it's just how it is. It's tied up in the bones of the game, and to replace the bones is technically possible. You can get in there and go crazy, but it's probably going to be more trouble than it's worth, and you might as well just wait for a sequel or something when you can do something.
Hey, you might as well wait until they release Elder Scrolls 6 completely. Fuck it up because it's on the same engine as this garbage dumpster fire. And then say, oh, maybe now it's time to rework the stupid engine because we're absolute fucking laughing stock of failures. Yeah, maybe that's a great decision, huh?
Something much more significant, much more easily. Beyond that, the smaller issues, the paper cuts, as that one respondent put it, can be patched or band-aided over and improved through patches, updates, and DLC. And I fully expect that the DLC will introduce more content that...
I'm also sure this was, server issue, engine problem, that the fact that they needed to make this strip club as boring as whatever the hell is this supposed to be. I'm sure there was an engine limitation to adding strippers. Yeah, I'm sure. 100% sure, in fact. Yeah. I'm sure Starfield being a bad game is blatantly the engine's fault.
That is just as compelling as the base game. But Starfield was never really a game that suffered from a lack of content. Its problems were always technical.
What do you fucking mean? There's no content in Starfield.
And mechanical. And DLC is just frankly not going to do anything to significantly alter that.
Now I do believe that, and I can't wait for the DLC, boys. The DLC is gonna be great. It's gonna be amazing. Oh boy, I am not even buying the DLC, by the way. I'm not gonna waste my money. Starfield can go rot in hell. But I am gonna laugh about it, because it's gonna be made by the same guy who already made Starfield's dialogues, and well, that guy's an idiot. And he goes on Twitter tirades saying how great he is and how stupid everyone else is who doesn't understand the greatness of his storyline telling. Yeah, that can only end well.
They also said 4 months ago that they were working on new features we've been asking for, from city maps to mod support to all new ways of traveling. And what that means, I don't know. Most likely it's like a motorcycle or a dune buggy or a rover or something like that. Maybe just...
It's gonna be a flyable Gundam mech that explodes after 5 seconds. There you go.
New jetpacks. I mean, that might be all it is. Either way, they say they're working on something. I hope that that makes the game better or feel less dull when you're moving from points.
How is it gonna make the game feel less dull? You understand why this is not gonna work, don't you? Because think about it. What's your gaming experience? Well, currently your game experience in Starfield is you fast travel to a planet, you get out of your ship, then you run as fast as possible in the straightest line possible to your destination, and that's where you get another load screen. That's right, baby boo. So, what are they gonna do? They're gonna make you get to the load screen faster? That's just gonna make people complain more about the load screens. That's it.
Of interest to points of interest, and city maps will be great when we get those, and mod support when that comes will be cool. Time will tell. But again, these are all just band-aids on paper cuts. The missing limbs are not really being addressed because they frankly can't, and so we just kind of have to deal with it. And then we land on the elephant in the room, which is like, oh, Bethesda should change over to the Unreal Engine, they should do that. And like, obviously,
yes, I don't care why you're gonna say they can't do it because it's expensive or some shit like that.
Obviously, I think there's reason to be frustrated with Bethesda for sticking with the creation engine this long. But I think that's exacerbated by the fact that, like I said at the top, Starfield is probably the worst game they could have made to showcase the creation engine's strengths. Like, it really is just not capable of doing what they needed it to do for this game. It's just not built for it. It's designed for totally different games, like the opposite type of game. And so I think that made the creation engine look far worse than it actually is. I think if you were to do another standard Fallout game or another standard Elder Scrolls game, it could potentially fare much better. But I think at this point, Bethesda has a bit of a PR crisis on their hands, and that is that everybody views the creation engine as an albatross around their neck. They view it as anathema, as something that needs to be shed and gotten rid of. And the longer that BGS doubles down on it, the more out of touch it makes them seem. There was a political consultant in the United States back in like the 1980s who coined the phrase that perception is reality. And he was putting it forward in the context of a presidential race where, like, if everybody thinks that you as the president are actually like a werewolf, even if that's not true, even if you could prove that's not true, if everybody thinks you're a werewolf, you have to deal with that. You have to,
yeah, that's true,
to confront that reality.
Wait, which president was the werewolf? Uh-oh.
Because that's what people perceive reality to be. And in the context of selling people video games or just products in general, if everybody's convinced that your tech or your product is woefully out of date or is super behind the times and is just broken, buggy, and blah, 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 even if that is not technically true, even if you could demonstrate that the creation...
Well, wait, how is it not technically true? The literal 3 load screens that you need to get through in one by one to get to your next objective, are they not real? Is that not the fault of the engine? How are people getting this magical false perception of the engine being bad if we have on full display the engine being bad? Now, I understand if you're going to say, wait a minute, the engine's not bad for everything. It's just kind of bad for only this, but in Skyrim it would be better. Now I would understand, but we objectively see the engine just being shit here. We objectively can monitor as players without any problems, without any turbulations even, that the engine that Starfield is built upon is shitty and bad, and it limits the game. So, you know, there you go.
Engine actually is capable of doing crazy cool high-tech things. The perception among consumers is that it's a 15, 20, 30-year-old engine that is held together with duct tape and glue. And they've got to deal with that perception. Just slapping a 2 on the creation engine.
Well, it's not, again, this is not perception. This is reality that we have not been proven wrong about. Because think about it. Was Redfall made on the same engine? I think it was, wasn't it? But in any case, you know, games that were made 20 years ago were made on this same engine. And now games are still made on this same engine, but when they try to increase the scope a little bit of these games, they fall apart like shit. We have not seen success from this engine. So, considering we have not seen success, it's kind of fair to assume that there is no success. We have only seen failure. Again, this engine is objectively bad. There is no reason for anyone to say, well, hold on, wait a minute. We have seen this engine fail time and time again and be 20 years old, but it's not bad. No, that is not objective reality. Objective reality is very much the fact that engine bad.
Engine isn't going to do it. I'm sure when they reveal the Elder Scrolls 6, they're going to be like, oh, it's the Creation Engine 3.0 this time. It's totally different. And maybe this time people will listen and realize that that's not actually how that works. But I just think that they're dealing with a real crisis of trust with their community, and I think that the creation...
No, but seriously, who of the US presidents was a werewolf?
Engine has highlighted a lot of those shortcomings, with Starfield being kind of the prime example of when this goes poorly. And all of this is further compounded by the fact that CDPR, the guys that headed up Phantom Liberty, one of the most impressive technical showcases of any video game graphically in a hot minute, they are moving away from their proprietary engine, and they are developing all of their future Witcher games in the Unreal Engine 5.
Yeah.
That is crazy. Because if everybody agreed that the Red Engine was much more powerful than the Creation Engine, and CDPR is choosing to leave that behind to go to the Unreal Engine, what does that tell you about the Creation Engine? Like, what does that tell you about Bethesda's toolset?
True, it's shit. Anyway, that was Luke Steffens. Good video. Good video. Starfield, obviously, bad game. Deal with it. Anyway, this was Quizzer said. I can't wait for all of you Starfield cope losers to say, well, it's just like a game, don't play it. Why was to say bad things about the game? Because you're an idiot, that's why. Anyway, this is Quizzer said. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.